It wasn't like it happened all at once. That's what hurt the most. If Rachel had just told me, I might have been able to deal with it. But it was the little things building up over time that made my stomach twist. It started months ago. Small stuff. Rachel getting distracted during dinner, staring out the window like she wasn't even there. At first, I told myself it was nothing. But then, the excuses started. Late nights at work, random girls' nights with no real details. I never thought much of it until I realized I hadn't been invited to any of these nights. I'd ask about them, and she'd get defensive, her tone changing, like she was hiding something. But I didn't want to jump to conclusions. I convinced myself I was just overthinking things. We'd been married for 8 years. I trusted her. If something was wrong, she'd tell me, right? Still, there was this nagging feeling in my gut. It wasn't like I had any real proof. But the way she'd pull her phone away from me too quickly, or the way her smile never quite reached her eyes anymore. Something wasn't right. The night everything changed was at a gala. I didn't want to go. With everything feeling off, I wasn't sure I could handle it. But I went for her. We got there, and I tried to play along. But the whole time, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I found Rachel at the bar, laughing with Sam, my business partner, my friend. I watched them from across the room. She was leaning into him, her fingers brushing his arm a little too casually, too intimately. Her laugh was a little too loud, too forced. But it wasn't just that. It was the way they looked at each other, like they were in on some secret, like they shared something I didn't. Sam had always been charming, the kind of guy who lit up a room without even trying. But now, I saw it for what it was, a mask. I could see it in Rachel's eyes. The same thing I'd seen in people who were hiding a secret. And for the first time, I felt like a fool. I knew something was wrong, and I had been blind to it. I hadn't even taken a sip of my drink yet, but my hand was shaking, tightening around the glass like it could somehow protect me from what I was seeing. Rachel, my wife, was standing there, so close to Sam, smiling like everything was fine. But I knew better. I knew that smile was a mask, and it wasn't just a little thing. They had been hiding something from me. Something big. The worst part? I hadn't seen it coming. The betrayal wasn't just a mistake. It was a plan. A story they'd rehearsed. And I had been too busy, too trusting to notice it. But tonight, everything had changed. I don't know what hurt more, seeing Rachel with Sam like that, or the fact that I hadn't seen it coming. I stood there in the crowd, holding that damn bourbon, trying to keep my cool. But everything in me was screaming. My stomach was in knots. My heart pounding in my chest. I wanted to scream, but instead, I just watched them. The way Sam smiled at her, the way her body seemed to melt into his, like they were some perfect match. Like I wasn't even in the picture. The room around me felt like it was closing in. The laughter, the chatter. It was all so distant. All I could focus on was them. Rachel, my wife, the woman I thought I knew inside and out, was standing there with my business partner, acting like nothing was wrong. The worst part? She didn't even seem ashamed. Not 1 ounce of guilt in her expression. She was having fun, like this was just another night out, another laugh with an old friend. But I could see it, the chemistry between them. It was too natural, too easy. I wanted to confront them, right then and there. Walk up to them and ask Rachel what the hell was going on. But I didn't. Something held me back. Maybe it was the thought of how embarrassing it would be, or maybe it was because I wasn't ready to hear her lie to my face again. I wasn't ready to watch her deny everything I was seeing with my own eyes. So, I did the one thing that made sense in the moment. I walked away. I slipped out of the ballroom, unnoticed, and made my way to the back office. I needed space. Time to breathe. Time to think. I didn't want to look weak, didn't want anyone to see the rage bubbling up inside me. But I knew I had to do something. I couldn't just stand there and let this happen. They thought they could play me for a fool. But I wasn't some naive idiot. I'd built this empire with Sam. We'd been through everything together. Late nights at the office, tough deals, celebrations. He was my right-hand man. My brother in everything but blood. And Rachel, I had trusted her with my life. But now, I knew it was all a lie. I walked into the office and sat down in front of the monitors, taking a deep breath to steady my hands. I'd set up the cameras months ago. At first, it was just for security. But tonight, it was my weapon. I clicked through the feeds, watching them in real time. Every movement, every glance, every little touch. It was all there, playing out in front of me. I found it quickly. Sam, his hand brushing against Rachel's lower back, just a touch too familiar, too comfortable. That was all I needed. I didn't need more proof. I didn't need to see the rest of their game. I already knew what was going on. But I wasn't ready to expose them yet. I wanted them to feel the pressure, to know that I knew. I wanted to watch them squirm before I made my move. And that's exactly what I did. I activated the plan. My fingers moved quickly across the keyboard, linking the cameras to the main system in the ballroom. They'd never see it coming. I wasn't just going to confront them. I was going to make sure they understood that I'd been watching, that I knew everything, and that they had no idea what I was about to do. I sat there in the office, staring at the monitors, watching Rachel and Sam move through the crowd. I should have felt something else, maybe sorrow or relief that I finally knew the truth, but all I could feel was disgust. The more I watched, the clearer it became. This wasn't some random mistake or moment of weakness. This was calculated, rehearsed. They had been lying to me for months, maybe longer, and they thought they could get away with it. I knew I needed to act. I had to be careful, though. I could have stormed into that ballroom, confronted them right then and there, but that would have given them exactly what they wanted. To see me lose control, to see me look like the fool. I wasn't about to give them that satisfaction. Instead, I did what I do best. I took control. Slowly, methodically. I'd set everything up days before without them knowing. The cameras, the feeds, the plan. I knew the game better than they did. I'd spent years reading people, understanding their patterns, their lies. I wasn't going to let this go down like a bad sitcom where the betrayed husband just stumbles into the truth. No, I would show them that I was always a step ahead. I clicked through the camera feeds one last time, confirming everything was in place. The ballroom's main system was linked up, and once I gave the signal, the footage would play. I didn't need to get up and confront them in front of everyone. I wanted them to feel it. Feel the weight of their secret closing in on them without even knowing how far I'd gone to expose it. Then, with a tap on the keyboard, I activated the plan. The lights in the ballroom dimmed slightly, the music stuttered for a second, just enough to make people stop and glance around. The screen above the stage flickered to life. At first, people probably thought it was a technical glitch. But then, the video started. It was exactly what I needed. The footage showed Sam and Rachel in a private moment, caught in a moment of intimacy. They were too caught up in each other to notice. Too careless. The video caught them, their lips brushing, hands in places they shouldn't be. The room went dead silent. Rachel's face went pale, her fake smile disappearing in an instant. I watched her eyes go wide with panic. For the first time, she wasn't pretending. She couldn't hide what was happening anymore. Sam looked like a deer caught in headlights, unable to react, to fix it. His charm was gone. The man who thought he was untouchable now looked as vulnerable as anyone. The silence in the room was deafening. People were whispering, exchanging looks, some of them clearly in shock, others looking away uncomfortably. But I didn't care about the crowd. I wasn't doing this for them. I was doing this for me, to take back control, to show Rachel and Sam just how wrong they were to think they could fool me. I didn't need to say anything. I didn't need to make a scene. I had already done the work. They thought they could keep their secret, but now it was out, and they had no way of denying it. The truth was right there, for everyone to see, and I was done being the fool. For a moment, the room was completely still. The silence after the video played was suffocating. I didn't look at anyone, just focused on Rachel and Sam. I wanted to see their reactions, watch them unravel. They didn't disappoint. Rachel was the first to react. Her hand shot up to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. For a second, she looked like she might collapse. Her gaze snapped to mine, but she didn't say a word. She couldn't. Her face said everything, the guilt, the panic, the realization that there was no way out of this. She had been caught, and she knew it. Sam wasn't far behind. He stiffened, his face going pale. The cocky, confident man I'd known for years looked completely rattled. He glanced around the room, clearly trying to figure out how to spin this, how to talk his way out of it. But there was no escaping it. The video had already played, the truth was laid bare, and he couldn't deny it. He was caught. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. Their silence said it all. Rachel's forced smile disappeared, replaced by something raw, panic. I'd never seen her so vulnerable, so exposed. And Sam? He was trying to regain control, but I could see the wheels turning in his head. He knew he couldn't fix this. The damage was already done. I didn't care what they said. I wasn't interested in their excuses, their apologies. I had already seen everything I needed to see. The truth was out, and they couldn't take it back. This wasn't about making a scene or confronting them. It was about them realizing they had underestimated me. They thought they could get away with this, thought I wouldn't notice. But they were wrong. They exchanged looks, both trying to figure out how to salvage whatever dignity they thought they had left. But they were stalling. I could see it. They weren't sure what to do, how to get out of this mess. And I just stood there, calm and collected, knowing I had already won. Finally, Sam tried to speak. His voice cracked when he said Rachel's name, like he wasn't sure who he was trying to convince more, her or himself. Rachel, I don't know what to say. Rachel didn't even look at him. Her gaze was fixed on the screen, as if she could make the video disappear just by staring at it. When she spoke, her voice was small, almost pleading. Please, this isn't what it looks like. I almost wanted to laugh, but I didn't. It was the oldest trick in the book. Deny, deflect, hope it'll all blow over. But it wasn't working. The lie was too obvious. There was nothing either of them could say to undo what had just happened. I wasn't trying to make a spectacle out of this. But as I stood there, watching them fall apart, I realized something. This wasn't just about exposing their affair. This was about taking back control, taking back what they had stolen from me. My trust, my dignity, and my peace of mind. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally in charge again. It's strange how everything slows down in moments like this. 1 second, the room was buzzing with chatter. The next it was as if the world had stopped turning. Rachel and Sam were frozen, and I was the only one moving, just a little more calmly than either of them. Their eyes darted from each other to the crowd, but it was clear they were scrambling. They couldn't fix this, not now. Not after everything was already out in the open. Rachel was the first to speak, but her words came out in a rush, panicked and barely coherent. You don't understand, this isn't what it looks like. She reached for Sam, but he flinched back from her touch, looking more rattled than I had ever seen him. The man who could charm anyone, who made a career out of convincing people to trust him, now looked like a deer caught in headlights. I didn't immediately respond. There was no need. I could see how the guilt was eating away at her, how she was trying to stitch together the story that had crumbled in front of her eyes. But there was nothing left to say. The video had already told the story for them. Finally, I broke the silence. My voice was calm, steady. So what was the plan? Keep lying until I caught on? I glanced at Sam. Or were you hoping I'd never find out? Rachel's face twisted as if the words had physically struck her. She opened her mouth, but there was nothing she could say that would change the reality now. Sam looked like he wanted to say something, but the words were gone. It was the first time in our entire relationship that I saw him completely out of his depth. He had always been the one who was good at controlling the room, but now the room had turned on him. Rachel stepped closer, and I could see the desperation in her eyes. This is a mistake, I swear, she said, her voice trembling. I didn't flinch, didn't respond. There was no point. Her words were just more of the same, empty excuses that wouldn't fix what was broken. I didn't need her to explain. I didn't need Sam to apologize. I had seen enough, and now I was done. I turned and walked away, not bothering to look back. The crowd still buzzed behind me, uncertain, but I wasn't interested in them. I had already won. It wasn't about making a spectacle of it, about forcing them to grovel. No, this was about taking back control. Rachel and Sam thought they could keep me in the dark, thought I was the fool. But the truth was out now, and they were left to deal with the fallout. As I stepped out of the ballroom, I felt a strange sense of calm. The anger, the hurt, it had all faded away. I wasn't angry anymore. I was free. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. It wasn't over yet. Not by a long shot. But as I walked out of the ballroom, there was a weight lifting off my chest, a clarity I hadn't felt in months. I had expected to be flooded with anger or maybe heartbreak, but instead, there was this strange calm, like I'd been holding my breath and could finally exhale. I didn't know what came next. I didn't know if Rachel would try to reach out, if Sam would send some half-assed apology. But I didn't care. Not anymore. They had both made their choices, and they had underestimated me. They thought they could keep their little secret going, thinking I was too oblivious to notice. But I wasn't the fool they thought I was. And now, they had to live with the consequences. I sat in my car for a while, the engine idling, just staring out the windshield. The cold air cut through the cracked window, but I didn't feel it. I didn't feel anything. But then, just as I was about to start the car and drive away, my phone buzzed. I didn't have to look to know who it was. Rachel. I didn't answer. Instead, I stared at the screen for a few moments, watching the name flash over and over again. Part of me wanted to pick it up, to hear her side, to hear her beg. But the part of me that was finally tired of her lies, tired of the game, shut it down. She had nothing to say that would fix what had been broken. I wasn't going to sit here and listen to her explain it away. Not anymore. I had made my move, and now it was their turn to deal with the fallout. They had chosen each other, and they had chosen the consequences. I didn't owe them anything. I put the phone on silent and drove off. I didn't know where I was going or what I was going to do next. But for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of freedom. It wasn't the kind of freedom I had expected. It wasn't a triumphant feeling of I showed them. It was the quiet kind of freedom, the kind that comes when you finally stop letting someone else control your life. When I finally got home, the house felt emptier than I remembered. The place we had built together felt cold and unfamiliar now. But I didn't need to feel sorry for myself. I wasn't broken. I wasn't defeated. I was just done. Rachel would try to apologize, and Sam would probably try to explain, but it didn't matter. The truth was, they had already lost me. They had already lost everything they took for granted. And I wasn't going to be the one to beg for it back. Not this time. The next few days passed in a haze. Rachel's calls, her messages, they piled up, but I didn't answer. I didn't want to hear her apologies or explanations. Nothing she said could change what I knew, what I'd seen. I wasn't interested in her begging for forgiveness. Sam never reached out, which surprised me, but in a way, it didn't. He wasn't the type to apologize, not genuinely. He'd try to smooth things over with some half-hearted excuse, but I wasn't buying it. And honestly, I didn't care enough to hear it. I had no room for his lies anymore. I went through the motions, showing up to work, handling business. But everything felt off. Sam and I had been partners for years, but now I couldn't even look at him without feeling disgust. He was just another guy who had broken my trust. The friendship we once had was gone, replaced by the sharp sting of betrayal. At home, it was quieter than I'd ever remembered. The silence wasn't just because we weren't speaking, it was the absence of everything that had once held us together. Rachel had taken all of that with her. I'd spent years believing in a life we built, and now that life felt like it was nothing but empty space. She came by a few times, knocking on the door, sending texts asking me to talk. But I couldn't bring myself to let her in, to listen to her try to explain away what had happened. I didn't need to hear it. I knew exactly what she had done, and I wasn't going to let her try to rewrite the story. One evening, after another failed attempt to reach me, I found a letter from Rachel on the kitchen counter. I hadn't asked for it, but there it was. I stood there for a moment, staring at it. I wasn't sure I even wanted to open it, but I did. It was short, filled with apologies, guilt, and a weak attempt at explaining why she had done what she did. But I didn't care. I read it once, maybe twice, and then tossed it in the trash without a second thought. I didn't need her words anymore. I didn't need to hear the same excuses, The same empty promises. The truth had already been laid bare, and nothing she said could undo that. The silence was becoming my friend. It was the space where I could heal, where I could think without being manipulated or lied to. I wasn't angry anymore, just done. I wasn't looking for revenge, or for her to beg me to come back. I had walked away with my dignity intact, and that was enough for me. So, day by day I moved forward. I didn't have all the answers, but I knew I was leaving the past behind. Rachel and Sam could deal with their mess however they wanted. I was finally free of the lies. Weeks went by, and slowly, the storm inside me began to settle. There were still moments when I'd think about Rachel, about what we had before everything fell apart. But those moments were fleeting, and I didn't dwell on them. The truth was, I was learning to live without her. I was learning to live without the lie. At work, things felt normal, as much as they could anyway. But every time I saw Sam, I couldn't help but feel that pang of disgust. He tried to act like nothing had happened, like we could just keep doing business the way we always had. But I couldn't ignore it. He was the same man who had betrayed my trust, my friend, my partner, and that wasn't something you could just erase. I kept my distance. It was easier that way. I couldn't be in a room with him and pretend everything was fine. I focused on the work, on building the future I had left for myself. There was a strange kind of relief in being on my own again, even if it came with a bitter aftertaste. And then there was Rachel. I had thought that after the silence, after I'd shut her out, she would have given up. But she didn't. She kept trying, sending messages, sometimes even calling from unknown numbers. She even showed up at my office once, looking desperate, hoping for some kind of answer. I never let her in. I didn't want to see her. She had made her choices, and now she had to live with them. One evening, I ran into one of our old friends, someone we used to hang out with before everything went south. They asked me how I was doing, and I could see the sympathy in their eyes. "How's Rachel?" they asked, as if nothing had changed. I wanted to tell them everything, to tell them what she had done, but instead, I just shook my head and said, "I'm doing fine. I'm better." I didn't owe anyone an explanation. Not Rachel, not Sam, not anyone. The truth was out there. People knew what had happened, even if they didn't know all the details. They knew enough to understand that I wasn't the one who had done anything wrong. I spent the rest of that evening thinking about how far I had come since that night. The night everything changed. The anger had faded, replaced by a steady calm. I didn't have the answers to all the questions that still lingered in my mind, but I knew I was stronger now. I had survived the worst of it. And though the scar of betrayal would always be there, I was learning to live with it. Rachel and Sam might have thought they could break me, that I would fold under the weight of their lies. But they were wrong. They didn't know me. They didn't know how much I had already been through before them. And now, I was moving forward, on my terms, with my dignity intact. In time, the pain would dull. In time, the memories would fade. But for now, all I could do was focus on the present, on the future I was building for myself without them. I wasn't broken. I was free. Life began to find a rhythm again. At first, the silence felt like a void. The house, once filled with Rachel's presence, now felt like my own space. It wasn't loneliness. It was peace. I could breathe in ways I hadn't in years. The weight of her absence was heavy at first, but over time, I grew used to it. I stopped thinking about her. The texts, the calls, the voicemails, all unanswered. She had done everything she could to reach me, but I had made up my mind. I was done. There was nothing left to say. Then, one afternoon, I ran into Rachel at the grocery store. It felt like the world paused for a second. There she was, standing in front of the produce aisle, just like she had always done. I hadn't seen her in weeks, and seeing her again hit me in a way I wasn't prepared for. It wasn't love, but the remnants of it, a mixture of old feelings, anger, and confusion. She looked up and saw me. There was a brief moment where neither of us moved. Then, slowly, she walked over. I could see her hesitation, the uncertainty in her eyes. She wanted to say something, maybe apologize, but I didn't need to hear it. "Hi," she said quietly, her voice shaky. I didn't answer right away. What was there to say? She stood there, acting like nothing had changed, like she hadn't just destroyed everything we built. But I knew better. I'm fine, Rachel. I'm really fine, I said flatly. Her face dropped, the weight of my words hitting her harder than I expected. She probably thought I'd be more open to hearing her side. But I wasn't interested. Not anymore. For a long moment, she just stood there, looking at me, as if searching for some crack in the wall I'd built. She opened her mouth, probably to explain or beg for another chance, but nothing came out. What could she say? What was left to say? Finally, I turned and walked away, my steps steady. No regrets. No second-guessing. I felt nothing but indifference. She was part of my past now. That was it. The rest of the day was quiet. I didn't go home and think about what could have been. I didn't dwell on the past. I had already let go. Rachel and Sam were behind me, and I didn't need them in my future. It felt freeing, better than I had imagined. I was moving forward, and I was doing it alone. And for the first time that felt okay. A few months passed, and the dust finally began to settle. The weight of everything that had happened wasn't as heavy as it once was. I wasn't entirely healed, not yet, but I had learned to live with it. The pain was still there in quiet moments, but it wasn't consuming me anymore. I was learning what it meant to be on my own again, and in a strange way, I was starting to enjoy it. Work had become my escape. I threw myself into it, diving into projects, making progress on things I had put off for too long. I was good at my job, and for the first time in a while, I felt like I was doing something that was just for me. I didn't have to worry about anyone else's problems or pretend that everything was okay when it wasn't. One evening, I was out with some colleagues, people I had worked with for years but never really got close to. It was a casual get-together, the kind where you drink a little too much and talk about everything and nothing at the same time. As the night went on, I found myself talking to one of them about everything. I guess I had never really realized how much I had kept inside. They asked me about my past, about what had happened with Rachel and Sam, but I didn't feel the need to explain everything. I didn't owe anyone an in-depth story. Instead, I just gave them the basics. How everything had fallen apart, how betrayal had come from people I trusted most. I wasn't bitter when I said it. It wasn't anger that colored my words anymore. It was just the truth. The conversation shifted, and we started talking about life in general, about relationships, what makes them work, what makes them fail. And as we spoke, I realized something. I wasn't afraid of being alone anymore. I didn't need someone else to fill the space in my life, to make me feel whole. I had been through the worst, and I had come out the other side still standing. That was enough for me. After that night, I didn't feel the need to reach out to Rachel or Sam. It was like the last thread that kept me tethered to them had finally snapped. I wasn't holding on to the past anymore. I wasn't letting their choices define me. A few weeks later, I even found myself laughing, genuinely laughing, at something small, a stupid joke at work. It hit me then that, while I had lost a lot, I had also gained something back. I had regained myself. The pain wasn't gone, but it wasn't controlling me anymore. I wasn't looking over my shoulder, wondering what Rachel was doing or if Sam was still trying to make himself feel better. I had stopped waiting for answers that I would never get. Life was beginning again, in its own quiet way. And for the first time in a long time, I was okay with that. Months had passed, and life was beginning to feel normal again. I had settled into my routine, finding peace in the quiet and focusing on work. I was moving forward, slowly but steadily, without Rachel or Sam in the picture. There were moments of reflection, of course, like when I'd lie in bed at night and think about what had happened. But overall, I was learning to breathe again, to be okay with being alone. Then one afternoon, as I was heading out of the office after a long meeting, I ran into someone unexpected. Sarah, one of Rachel's close friends. I hadn't seen Sarah since everything fell apart. She had been at some family gatherings in the past, and I had always considered her a friend. But when Rachel's affair came to light, Sarah, like most people in our circle, had kept her distance. I hadn't thought much about her, but now, there she was, standing near the elevator, looking a little unsure of herself. "Hey," she said when she saw me, her voice tentative. I paused, not sure what to say. Part of me wondered if this was just another person tied to Rachel, trying to play some part in cleaning up the mess. But when Sarah looked at me, it wasn't guilt or pity, it was something more genuine, something like empathy. "I've been meaning to reach out," she said, "but I didn't know how. I wasn't sure how to respond. I had no idea why she was here or what she wanted." But when she spoke again, I could tell she wasn't just making small talk. She was trying to be honest. "I'm really sorry for everything that happened with Rachel. You didn't deserve any of that, and I don't think I handled it the right way. I should have been there for you. I hadn't expected this." Sarah had always been kind, but I'd never imagined her coming forward like this, admitting that she hadn't done enough to support me when everything went down. I gave her a long look before answering. "It's not your fault. You weren't the one who betrayed me." She nodded, looking a little relieved. "I know, but I should have said something. I should have at least reached out. I was just so caught up in everything with Rachel. I didn't know how to be there." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. It felt strange, hearing someone finally acknowledge the truth, even if it was just in this small way. "I don't need anything from you, Sarah," I said finally. "But I appreciate you saying that." She smiled, and it was clear that the weight had lifted off her shoulders. "I get it. I just wanted you to know I'm sorry. And if you ever want to talk, I'm here." I nodded, smiled briefly, and walked away. It wasn't about rebuilding our friendship or asking for forgiveness. It was just about honesty. In a weird way, it made me feel a little lighter. I didn't know if Sarah and I would ever reconnect, but that wasn't the point. What mattered was that I had taken another step forward. I wasn't letting the past define me anymore. Life had a way of surprising you, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like a good surprise. As the months went by, I began to find a sense of normalcy again. It wasn't perfect, and there were still moments when the past crept in. Something small would remind me of Rachel, of what I had lost, but it didn't consume me the way it once did. I was learning to be alone, and in a strange way, I was starting to appreciate the quiet. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't looking over my shoulder or wondering what anyone thought of me. Then, one evening, I went out with some coworkers to unwind at a local bar. Nothing special, just a casual drink after a long week. The place was crowded, the usual mix of people, the hum of conversation and music in the background. I wasn't expecting anything to change, just another night where I could forget about everything for a bit. That's when I saw her. Rachel. She was standing by the bar, talking to someone I didn't recognize. The moment our eyes met, it was like everything else in the room faded away. I hadn't seen her in months, but just the sight of her brought back that old tension, the weight of everything that had happened. Neither of us moved. We just stood there, looking at each other. It was strange. Her eyes held something I couldn't quite read. Maybe guilt, maybe regret. But I didn't care anymore. I had moved on from that. I didn't need her to apologize or explain anything. I turned away first, focusing on my drink, trying to push the moment out of my mind. But then I heard her voice, low and hesitant. "Hey." I slowly turned back. She was a few feet away, looking different. More worn out, maybe. There was still a familiarity to her, but it wasn't the same. The easy confidence I remembered wasn't there. She looked unsure. "How have you been?" she asked, quietly. I could feel the weight of the question, like she was searching for something. I thought about all the things I could say, how she'd shattered everything, how I'd rebuilt my life without her. But instead, I just nodded. "I'm good," I said, keeping my tone even. "I've moved on." Rachel opened her mouth, like she was going to say something more, but she hesitated, and the words didn't come. She just stood there, and I could see the uncertainty in her eyes. It was the same hesitation I'd seen when I'd run into her months ago. She didn't know what to say anymore. I realized then that I didn't need any more closure. I didn't need apologies or answers. I had moved on. "Take care of yourself, Rachel," I said firmly. I turned back to my drink, signaling that the conversation was over. She didn't say anything else, just stood there for a moment longer before walking away. I didn't look back. As I finished my drink and chatted with my coworkers, I felt a quiet sense of finality. That encounter, that brief moment, had been a full stop to everything. The past was behind me. I didn't need to keep looking back anymore. And as I walked out of the bar that night, I realized I was finally free. I wasn't tied to that past anymore, and I didn't need anything from it. I had my peace. I had moved on. In the days that followed, I felt something new settling in, something I hadn't expected. A sense of real freedom. It wasn't just that I was done with Rachel and Sam, it was that I was done with the past. The weight had been lifted in ways I couldn't explain. Every day felt like a fresh start, a little bit clearer, a little bit lighter. I spent more time on myself. I started taking better care of my health, something I'd neglected for too long. I joined a gym, not to get in shape for anyone else, but for me. To reclaim the energy I'd lost, to build something new in a body that had carried too much baggage for far too long. It wasn't just about physical fitness, either. I was learning how to put myself first again, how to care for myself the way I had once cared for those around me. I also reconnected with old friends. People I had lost touch with because I'd been so wrapped up in my own drama. It felt good to laugh again without the weight of betrayal in my chest. I was rediscovering parts of myself that had been buried under the rubble of lies and disappointment. One weekend, I went to a local art exhibit with a friend, something I would have never done before. I stood there, surrounded by paintings, listening to the soft murmurs of people around me, feeling like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I didn't feel the need to be anywhere else. There was no pressure, no expectations, just the quiet enjoyment of being present. In the weeks that followed, I started dating again. It wasn't serious. I wasn't in a hurry to dive into anything, but I had forgotten how nice it was to feel like I could connect with someone on a different level. It wasn't about filling the space Rachel had left. It was about realizing that I could still find joy in someone else's company, without comparing them to what I had lost. The more time passed, the more I realized that I wasn't broken. I hadn't been destroyed by the affair, by the lies, or by the people I had trusted. If anything, I was stronger. I had rebuilt myself from the ground up, and the person I was becoming was someone I liked. I learned to forgive, not for their sake, but for mine. Holding on to the anger, the bitterness, it didn't serve me anymore. It was a weight I no longer wanted to carry. I wasn't going to waste any more energy on people who had chosen to walk away from me. I had chosen myself. And then, one evening, I found myself sitting on my balcony, the sun setting in front of me, feeling a sense of peace that I hadn't thought possible just months ago. Everything had changed, but it had changed for the better. I wasn't where I thought I would be, but I was exactly where I needed to be. The past no longer controlled me. I had made peace with it. And in that moment, I realized something important. I was starting over, and this time, I was going to do it right. It was one of those rare, quiet days when everything seemed to be in its right place. I'd come a long way in the months since everything had fallen apart. The sting of betrayal, the lingering anger, all of it was fading into the background. I had built a new life, piece by piece, and was learning to appreciate the moments that mattered. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control again. I had been spending a lot of time focusing on my own growth, working on projects I was passionate about, reconnecting with friends, and just enjoying my own company. I was learning to embrace the stillness, to find peace in the quiet spaces where I used to feel the weight of everything I'd lost. It wasn't about erasing the past, but about making room for something new. That afternoon, I took a walk through the park near my apartment, something I hadn't done in ages. I needed the fresh air, the space to clear my head. The park was calm, the kind of place where you could lose yourself in nature for a little while. I walked slowly, taking in the simple things. Kids running by, couples sitting on benches, the rustle of the trees in the breeze. It was peaceful in a way that made me realize just how far I had come. As I walked along the path, I saw a familiar face. It was one of my old neighbors, someone I hadn't seen in months. We used to chat every now and then before everything with Rachel happened, and I couldn't help but feel a little odd seeing him now. But when he saw me, he smiled like nothing had changed. "Hey man, how you been?" he asked, genuine concern in his voice. For a moment, I hesitated. A lot had happened, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to dive into any of it. But then I realized, I didn't have to. The past didn't have to define this moment. I had moved on, and it felt good to say it out loud. "I'm doing great, actually," I said, with a smile I hadn't used in a while. "Better than I've been in a long time." He raised an eyebrow. That's good to hear. I know things were tough for a while. He paused, as if weighing whether to say more. I'm glad to see you're doing okay. I nodded, not wanting to go into too much detail. Yeah, I'm good. Really good. Just moving forward, you know? He smiled, as if understanding exactly what I meant. That's all you can do, man. As I walked away from the park, I felt a sense of clarity that I hadn't felt before. It wasn't just that I was moving on, it was that I had reached a place where I was okay with everything that had happened. I didn't need closure from Rachel or Sam. I didn't need to go back and rewrite the past. I had made peace with it, and that was enough. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about thriving. The things that had once hurt the most, the betrayal, the lies, were no longer shackles. They were simply part of my story, but they didn't define who I was. I wasn't the person I had been before Rachel's affair. I had grown. I had learned. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was truly starting to live again. The past was behind me. The future was wide open. And for the first time in a long time, I was excited to see where it would take me. It's strange how life has a way of moving forward, even when you're not entirely sure you're ready for it. The days blended into weeks, and soon enough, months had passed. The sense of clarity I had felt a while back was still there, but now it felt like more than just a momentary shift. It was something deeper, something permanent. I had found peace, but I had also found a kind of freedom I hadn't known before. The freedom wasn't just in leaving the past behind, but in how I chose to shape my future. I wasn't waiting for anything anymore, not for Rachel to apologize, not for Sam to face consequences, not for any of the things that had once consumed me. I had stopped giving my energy to things I couldn't control. I had begun to understand that the real power wasn't in revenge, or even in forgiveness, it was in choosing how to move forward. And for the first time in a long time, I was deciding to make the most of the life I still had. One evening, I went out for dinner with a group of friends I'd made over the past few months. They were people I could relax with, talk to without feeling the weight of my past. It was the kind of group that didn't need to know every detail of your life to enjoy being around you. We just spent the night laughing, eating, talking about everything and nothing. It felt good. Really good. At one point, someone asked if I was seeing anyone, and I found myself smiling before I could stop myself. I hadn't thought much about dating for a while. I wasn't rushing into anything, not looking for another relationship to fill the gap that Rachel had left. But there was something in the way they asked, something that made me realize that maybe, just maybe, I was ready for something new. No, not right now, I said, shrugging. But I'm open to it. I think I'm just focused on being happy on my own for now. There was something freeing about saying that out loud. I wasn't in a hurry to fill a void. I wasn't looking for validation from anyone else. I had found my own peace, and that felt more fulfilling than anything else could. As the night went on, I found myself thinking about how far I had come. I'd been to the edge of despair, felt like I was losing everything. But now I felt solid. I was my own person again. I wasn't trying to rebuild something that had crumbled. I was building something new, something better. When I got home later that night, I stood on my balcony and looked out at the city. It wasn't the same view I had when I was with Rachel, but it was mine. I realized that I didn't need to look back anymore. There was no unfinished business. I wasn't chasing answers or closure. I was exactly where I needed to be. It wasn't about making up for lost time or pretending the past never happened. It was about recognizing that life moves forward, whether you're ready for it or not. And I was ready now. Ready to live for me, to make the choices that were right for me, and to embrace whatever came next. The road ahead wasn't clear. But that was okay. Because for the first time in a long time, I knew I was walking it on my own terms.